I think there used to be a general consensus that we wanted to elect presidents that were going to look out for the better interests of all Americans. And if there was going to be a crisis or a natural disaster, we wanted somebody that could put partisan politics aside and make sure that the American people were looked after. But with an incoming Trump administration, we know this is something we can no longer expect. We saw how things went in his first term, where he even bungled a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And in fact, he screwed it up so badly that the American people booted him out of office in a pretty resounding way. That's why it's an indictment of the American people that this is the guy who is going to be our next president. They were willing to put him back into office after he decided to withhold aid from Georgia because he was having an argument with their governor. They were willing to put a man back in office after he only approved 1% of aid in North Carolina, even though North Carolina voted for him in 2016. But because they had a Democratic governor that Trump wasn't too fond of, he was just willing to deny 99% of their disaster relief. And this is something that we need to be prepared for in a second Trump administration. We need to be prepared for Trump to do this petulant politics bullshit. We need to be prepared for him to play games and exploit crisis for his own gain. And we have Republicans going around on mainstream media trying to gaslight the American people into thinking that Donald Trump is going to look out for all Americans. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a crazy lefty. He's going to be there and be strong. Here's Dusty Johnson trying to sell that exact narrative that every single American should know by now is a load of horse shit.
I would say this. Clearly, President Trump speaks from the stump in a very different way than I do. It said that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. We actually know how this guy is going to govern. He was president for 4 years. He didn't cut off funding. He didn't look at people whose homes were burned down and say, forget about it. You had a Biden sign in your yard, so we're just going to pass on by your home. Those things did happen in the last administration, probably in a narrow way. But I got to tell you, Donald Trump will be there to help out people in California. He was there 4 years ago. He'll be there now.
I'm just going to.
What is this guy talking about? And yes, he is right about one thing. We know how he will govern. We know that he wanted to withhold funding from California until he learned that, oh, some of those people voted for him too. Even his own former chief of staff has come out and admitted that he told FEMA to cut off all the aid to California because he was so pissed off that people in California didn't support him.
So dozens of deadly and historic wildfires continue to wreak havoc on the West Coast.
And I see again the forest fires are starting. We're just going to have to make them pay for it because they don't listen to it.
Look, it's one of the president's responsibilities to protect all Americans, regardless of threat or hazard. We had wildfires raging out of control in California, and the president would say to us, I hate Jerry Brown. He doesn't support me. The Californians don't do anything for me. I'm sick of helping them out. On a phone call with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, he told FEMA to cut off the money and to no longer give individual assistance to California. He told us to stop giving money to people whose houses had burned down from a wildfire because he was so rageful that people in the state of California didn't support him and that politically it wasn't a base for him. These are people who are Americans too, but that's how he operates.
So imagine how cruel this is. You have people that have lost all of their livelihood. Their house has been burned down to the ground. They have nowhere to go. And they should be able to look to the federal government for some immediate assistance. But because Donald Trump is such a petulant child, he was willing to withhold aid. Because Donald Trump is a transactional man. Unless he thinks he is going to get something out of it, he is not willing to provide the aid. Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump. He is not looking out for the American people. We already know that, like I said, he had to be convinced to provide more aid to California, and he was only convinced by his team coming together and showing him just how many people voted for him in a certain section of the state.
Two former Trump administration officials now tell Politico's E&E News that as president, Trump repeatedly hesitated to give disaster aid to areas he considered politically hostile or ordered special treatment for pro-Trump states. One of those sources, former National Security Council official Mark Harvey, said that Trump initially refused to approve disaster aid for California after deadly wildfires in 2018 because of the state's Democratic leanings. But Harvey said Trump changed his mind after Harvey pulled voting results to show him that heavily damaged Orange County, California, had more Trump supporters than the entire state of Iowa. Quote, "We went as far as looking up how many votes he got in those impacted areas to show him these are people who voted for you," Harvey said. Harvey, who's since endorsed Kamala Harris for president, later said of Trump, "There's no empathy for the survivors. It's all about getting your photo up, right? Disaster theater to make him look good."
Disaster theater to make him look good. Donald Trump is only interested in exploiting these natural disasters. He is only playing a game to win political points. And if that means that the American people have to suffer, then so be it. Because Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump. And I think we really need to think about how we move through this second Trump administration and be willing to cut our Democratic leaders some slack. Because in order for them to get the disaster relief or whatever aid they need, they are going to have to play ball with Donald Trump. And many of us on the left, or people who don't like Trump, we aren't going to like it. But we need to understand that these Democratic leaders have an obligation to look out for their people. And so they will have to play ball with Donald Trump in order to get the federal aid that they need. This is something that we have to keep top of mind. And we need to maybe cut these Democratic leaders some slack, even though we don't like Donald Trump at all. We can scrutinize whatever types of deals they may make with Donald Trump, but we need to understand that they are only doing what is best for the people who elected them in their states. And we just really need to be mindful that the second Trump administration is going to be much, much worse than the first one. And Jasmine Crockett shows us how.
Is that he was surrounded by what I would consider to be actual experts, people that had actual resumes talking of diversity, equity, inclusion, and people just getting jobs and they're not qualified. I mean, when you look at the people that he has decided to nominate for these posts, we're talking about people that have never served a day in a lot of these various agencies that he's now like, oh, you should go ahead and head this agency. He has specifically decided that loyalist is who he wants around him. People that will not give him that honest kind of reflective moment and say, you know what, this isn't what we do. And that is my biggest concern about this.
And she is exactly right about that. It was only the people around Trump that were able to talk him in to doing the right thing. Donald Trump doesn't understand the greater good. He doesn't understand that a president should look out for all Americans, regardless of their political leanings. And because Donald Trump is only staffing up with the biggest Trump sycophants, we can expect that those are the people, or those people aren't going to be the ones that are going to talk him into doing the right thing. Are we supposed to expect that somebody like Stephen Miller is going to say, yeah, Donald, it's really going to be the right thing to do to provide the relief down in California? I'm not counting on it. So we really need to be mindful of what this second Trump administration is going to look like. We need to remember that Donald Trump is a petulant child, and if he doesn't get anything out of the deal, then he's willing to let Americans suffer. He is not the America First candidate that he claims to be. He is only America first for the right types of Americans. And if you lean left or if you voted for a Democrat, then all bets are off. And we know he is going to be willing to do this again because even during his campaign, he was already threatening California with withholding aid during a disaster.
Gavin Newsom is going to sign those papers. And if he doesn't sign those papers, we won't give him money to put out all his fires. And if we don't give him the money to put out his fires, he's got problems. He's a lousy governor.
Donald Trump is going to be a lousy president. We already know what his first term looked like. That's why it is so insane to me that he's getting a second crack at it. The American people did not like how he handled himself during the COVID-19 pandemic. They kicked him out of office. And now they're just going to let him come in and do it all over again? And this Palisades fire down in California right now is such a devastating event that we need a responsive federal government that can provide the relief that is needed. But I don't know that we're going to be able to count on that. And that is a damn shame. And so if we have somebody like Gavin Newsom playing ball with Donald Trump, we should probably be willing to cut him some slack. Because that is the only way he is going to be able to get the relief necessary for Californians. And we need to remember that Donald Trump isn't going to have any of the people around him that he did in his first administration. We're not going to be able to count on some of his staff talking him in to do the right thing. So we need to be prepared for that. And us in the alternative media sphere or those on the ground, they need to push back and point out this blatant cruelty. They need to be there to push back against all of the hypocrisy. But we cannot expect our Democratic leaders to lead the charge in that rhetorical fight, because they have a duty to the citizens of their states to get that relief. So it's going to have to be a multi-pronged approach where we are hitting Donald Trump from this side while Democratic governors are getting the aid they need to provide to their citizens. So I'm hoping I'll get to do another video on the Palisades fire and all of the insane nonsense that is being spread by the likes of Donald Trump and his acolytes. But I do think it's really important to be prepared for the incoming Trump administration that is only looking to exploit natural disasters to win political points. So I will leave it there for now. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. Like I said, we need to build an alternative media apparatus that can push back against the right-wing media ecosystem that is constantly shoveling shit to the American people. So if you got anything out of this video, please do remember to subscribe. If you want to see just how insane the MAGA propaganda tour has become for Greenland, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, see you guys on the next one.